Stop tracking page views and start tracking metrics that matter. In the world of RevOps, there are KPIs that drive success, and there are those that simply look pretty. Look beyond the flash and wow of social media followings and impressions. Though externally impressive, they hold no water to the metrics that truly keep RevOps afloat and have meaningful outcomes. So today we're talking about the big hairy topic of metrics. I want to talk about metrics that revenue operations leaders should be tracking, but also the metrics that we shouldn't be tracking. So Olga, how about you kick us off here and get us started in this discussion?
Thank you for saying that, right? There's so many metrics that we should be tracking. I feel like we can sit there all day here and just talk about our favorite metrics to track, right? But what about the ones that we just waste our times, right? Well, to answer your question, like my favorite, is there such my favorite metric to track, Well, if you think about the high level view, right, the broad view of how your org is doing, well, of course, ACV and how you're pacing to goal. In the same sense, I like to track the forecast accuracy. And we can talk about tools or methods and techniques that take you there. The quota attainment and how my reps are doing. And I think the emerging sort of metric is the churn, retention, GRR, NRR, everything that has to do with the customer, with the customer health. We all know that now these days it's harder to get a new customer rather than to renew an existing one. So we better keep our existing customers healthy and happy. So and have that set of metrics buttoned up and watch them. And two, what we should not be tracking. Oh my God, there's also a laundry list, right?
We have time for all of them.
Let's start. But it's important because we can end up in analysis paralysis, right? Or death by data, or whatever you call it. You just get like too nuanced into those like numbers that as soon as you get like in the weeds, you lose the ability to rise above and see the bigger picture. So it's a balance for us to understand how sort of each team, each department, each function is doing because they have their own KPIs, but also keep an eye on the North Star, which is, ACV, ARR, the revenue delivery.
It's really interesting just on the just on customer churn alone. I think 5 years ago, if you'd asked any of us, I don't think it was on my radar, or if it was there, it was an important metric, but was acquisition. Now, top three, it has to be customer churn. Exactly as you said, Olga, as you have less and less customers coming in through new acquisition, more and more potentially churning, and the value and the money that walks out the door when they do churn and trying to win them back is nearly impossible. So it's interesting how churn has really taken the place in the pantheon, the top hit with the pantheon of metrics.
But let's make a positive PR, right? I come from the marketing world, like to make it positive. Let's not call it churn.
Yeah.
Retention.
Right. There you go.
And
that's the upside. Greg.
That's awesome. So for me, I come from the sales side and I'm a big believer in like Franklin Covey and a lot of that. And so talk about leading and lagging metrics. Yeah. And for me, I want to focus, all the lagging metrics are there, but there's not really much you can do about it. Like you get ACV, and yes, that's the most important metric in the company, your revenue number. Yeah. But you can't really do anything about it. It's like a post-mortem type of a metric. For me, it's about leading metrics. And so I like sales velocity. It's my absolute favorite thing. When I go to conferences, that's usually what I want to talk about.
Yep.
Sales velocity. So you're talking all of the leading measures that lead to ACV. You got your bookings. So like, what's your win rate? Right? What's your average deal size? How many opportunities are you creating? You're taking all of that and then dividing it on like how fast does it take you to do that?
Yep.
The reason I like that is coming from a sales background. If I'm looking at sales rep and he's not performing, it's always female sales reps never miss quota. So I'm serious that they're
it's so neat.
That is good. Well done.
Sales reps. So people, there you go. So if I've got a sales rep and he's missing quota, I want to know why.
Yep.
And I feel like with sales velocity, I can pinpoint exactly why that person's missing quota. Are they not producing enough opportunities? Are the opportunities they have not the right product? Are they the deal size too low? Or are they just not good at closing? Do they not build urgency? Do they not know how to get it past the finish line? And then if they do, how fast can they do it, right? Are they let stuff get stagnant? Does it take longer for them to close? And if one of those metrics is deficient, then I know exactly where I'm taking them from training. I'm not going to fire them over it, but I know where to go to triage their success.
Yeah.
And so that's why sales velocity is like the mecca of metrics for me from a go-to-market standpoint.
Yep, 100% agree. In fact, actually, that's what I listed myself as well, with sales velocity for the same reasons you listed. Shows you the general health of how your go-to-market is performing. It does not hide anything. It really does expose so many things that you as a RevOps leader then can go off and fix. What about on the flip side? What don't you like tracking? Or what you prefer companies not track?
So daily calls, leads enter into the system. Anything that you can manually do without.
But can I ask a difficult question? Because something that I'm trying to solve for myself, right? So sales velocity goes down, say your pipeline goes down, or pipeline goes down, all down. And you sort of go this rabbit hole of investigating as to why, right? And you end up with calls.
Yeah.
So
They're not making calls.
They're not making calls. They're not enough activities. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I don't want to track it. I don't want to track MQLs. But at the end of the day, you need to have, right?
I prefer to track conversations over calls, because if I have a conversation with someone, there is a potential for good. A call. I'll tell you a story. So when I won't name the company, but back early in my career, Qualtrics, they created what was called, they called it the minimum doc. And it was actually very good early stage RevOps of backtracking from someone's quota, exactly how many calls they needed to make.
Yeah.
That's cool.
To get the conversations,
Yeah.
to get the opportunities,
Yeah.
to get the advance, to get the closes at the average deal size. And so at the beginning of the quarter, based on your own metrics, you would have this list of like, hey, this quarter to hit your number, you've got to make, 150 phone calls and send 400 emails because that's how it was. But where they went wrong, and this is really early stage for Qualtrics, where they went wrong was if you didn't do those and you missed your number, you got put on claim 1 quarter in. So what it led to was these
fake calls,
average reps, like reps that weren't trained well, not their fault. We hire a lot of brand new sales reps, but they would get halfway through the quarter and realize they're not hitting their number. So if I don't hit my minimums, I'm going to get put on plan. But if I hit my minimums,
I'm fine.
I get another
okay for
quarter.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then they just start calling me.
Yes.
And they start sending blast emails.
Yeah.
And what it led to at the end of the quarter, they missed their number. The minimums doc got recalculated. And then there was reps that it was like, okay, for this quarter, based on last quarter's performance, you now have to make 1,500 phone calls, not a day, but 1,500, and you got to send out 10,000 emails. And they're like, oh. And so for me, it was like, yes, I want to track that, but I don't want to give reps
An ability to play the system.
to just play the system. And it's hard. And
Because they will always game the system. It's hard.
it.
They will always
It
find a
creates
way.
like a box checking mentality. And that's why I'm so glad none of you said that MQLs were the most important thing, metric to track, and especially from you, being that you came from marketing. So like that is the greatest thing I've ever heard, because I think
we should all stop tracking MQLs.
I agree.
yeah, I mean,
If you're in RevOps, honestly, if you're
It's crazy. It's crazy. I once worked with a marketing leader who literally went into Salesforce and built like a custom object to automate the tracking of MQLs because salespeople wouldn't check the box. And it was like this whole orchestrated thing just to give credit on a piece of paper for an MQL. And my whole thing with MQLs is like, what happens afterwards?
Right.
What happens
customer
after
feedback.
the meeting? Yeah, like it's just literally a box check. So So I agree with you in the sense that, Greg, that we don't want to, track calls to the number like if you didn't do 25 calls today, you're dead to me, right? So there has to be a conversational aspect of it and, what actually is happening with those calls, because it just really creates this level of box checking that just is not productive. Because at the end of the day, for me, metrics that matter are things like what's our win rate? So when I first got to my current organization, we had a win rate of like 15%. Deals were starting at stage 4 and we didn't even know what happened. There were deals in there for 300 days, just things that, that were just stuck. So we put together, a rigorous forecasting process, made stage actual requirements from 1 to 2. You have to start at 1 now. You have to start at stage 1, right? And so we've improved the win rate from 15 to 34%. And so that is a metric that matters, and, obviously there are a lot of different things. So I think it's important for your organization, from the very top of the organization, what is most important, right? So NRR is something, and GRR, these are really critical metrics. And so if the CRO, do they have customer success? Are they in charge of that? Then that metric is really going to matter.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I'm really big on the Moneyball metric, right? I'm a sports guy, and just the whole Moneyball concept of focusing on one thing that drives the most impact. Having every single role in your organization understand what the Moneyball metric is. Then you, as a RevOps leader, you tie them all together to paint the picture. But they don't need to focus on the other stuff. And I just think that people kind of get out of their lane and they start pointing fingers. And I mean, I think we can all agree that a world without attribution.
Thank you. I was waiting for attribution.
How many meetings have we sat
Right.
where the marketing leader and the sales leader just start fighting with each other on whose fault it was that something didn't push, and the CS leader's just kind of sinking in their chair because they just don't get to retention, right?
Right. And then it's you handed me garbage, right?
So it's if the marketing team handed the sales team garbage, and that's their fault that they didn't get new because it all just flows down.
We set it into MQL, and it's from our paid channel. It's one of the best channels. It came up with them. What do you mean it did not convert?
I don't know any decisions that have been confidently made off of attribution, right? Everyone still gets early in my career was I was told half of our marketing budget is wasted every year. We just don't know which half.
Right.
And that's just it comes with experience. You got to play with it. But those marketing the attribution numbers they're just cannon fodder for fights and
yeah, absolutely.
And what needs to be said, I think, is that every such metric can be easily manipulated.
100%.
You're right.
Oh my God, MQL today was not an MQL yesterday.
Yeah.
Right.
I can easily change it. Same attribution. I can recalculate everything overnight or what used to be. And then about, Sandy, about win rates, right? I worked at companies, also true stories. You can manipulate win rates.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can start calculating them at stage 5.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now our pipeline is something that is stage 4.
Right.
Everything before stage 4 is not really pipeline. It's just early discovery. And that's how we decided it, right? We can decide it. So every metric can be manipulated. And the horror stories that I've seen, I think that's where the power of RevOps comes in for us to be those arbitrators and stop it. You can calculate a win rate from stage 4, but your pipeline's going to shrink.
Right.
Yeah.
So your board deck is going to look very different.
Right.
Your pipeline is going to be so minimal and your win rate is going to be so up.
Right.
So what do you want to optimize for, right? It's this balance. And when we talk about executives sitting there preparing board decks, right? Everyone is optimizing their own metrics.
Yeah.
Marketing is driving attribution and
Absolutely.
MQL.
Everyone's got to justify,
Sales leaders sitting there driving the line on the sand on the win rate.
Sales math. Yeah.
And this is where we come in, folks, in our capes.
Well, and I think those definitions, to your point, are so critical, aligning on win rate in your company means something different in my company. So whatever that is fine as long as you're aligned. Yeah. So is it from stage 1? Is it from stage 2? You know, what does stage 1 mean? Have you defined those stages, which is a critical piece to understanding those metrics that do matter, the metrics that we're talking about. If you don't have a common definition, then it just doesn't mean anything. And you could be changing it every quarter, you know?
Your process has to be buttoned up.
Yes.
Very clear. What is stage 1? What is
Absolutely.
stage 2?
I'm going to steal something from Challenger Sale, but like teach, tailor, and take control of the process and the metrics. You got to define them. And you got to teach everybody what it means, and then tailor it to the company. Like, you can't just come in as a consultant. I come into dozens of companies. I can't just, hey, this is what an MQL means, because to them it might be something completely different. You got to tailor it and make sure that it fits that department, that company, everything there, and then take control. One of the key weaknesses I see in many RevOps leaders, not in this room, is standing up to the C-suite of the sales leader not being able to say like, no, that's wrong. I've got to switch it over, or the marketing leader coming in and saying, no, we had way more than that. And if you're not able to hold your ground, then you end up with this just scatter board deck, and it doesn't make sense to anyone. And then everybody's under the gun rather than just the people that are deficient. But it's hard, right? Yeah. It's hard to gain that and be able to stand on that. And I think experience helps, right? Once you're experienced, you have a lift for it. But I think the thing that will help inexperienced RevOps leaders or new RevOps leaders is defining it and getting the buy-in before those arguments happen. So that it's like in sales when you get like the presumptive buy, like, hey, if I do a really good job, you're going to buy at the end of this call, right? And everyone's like, yeah, sure. And then they get to the end of the call and you're like, good job. Like, okay. No. You get those agreements beforehand. Yeah. Then it's less likely to turn into like a title fight at the end. Yeah. So
we made through an entire metrics section, and no one mentioned anything about social media followers or likes on any social media, which actually gives me a lot of faith in the future of revenue operations as well. So that's actually a really good thing. Loving this show? Then you should definitely check out the team behind it. Sweetfish is a video podcast agency that partners with B2B brands to create amazing shows just like this one. Want to co-host the next season of this show? Or maybe your marketing team is looking to develop a show of their own? Head over to sweetfishmedia.com and book a call with their team. I'm going to switch over to our research roundup section now. So in this segment of the show, we do a quick discussion about some interesting data that the Sweetfish team has tracked down behind the scenes. So today we're talking about a stat that comes from the 2024 RevOps Salesforce statistics that Sonar put together. That report shows that 60.2% of companies now have a formally defined revenue operations function, which is a 7% increase compared to the previous year. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that, and kind of does that stat hold water with you? How about Greg? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think the big driver of this, though, is actually outside of the company. I think in the SaaS world, I come from the SaaS world, and most things are dictated by the VC company or the PE companies that is funding you. And with VC companies over the last year, they've all backed off the growth at all costs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now it's a painful back off because it usually involves layoffs and a few other things to right size the org. But they're starting to realize that, hey, we can't just throw bodies and money at these problems because it's no longer going to work. And so now we have to get a lot more efficient. Yeah. And that's when we look internal and say, okay, what can we do? And the answer just funnels to RevOps. Yeah. RevOps can make things more efficient. We can do more with what we have.
Do more with less.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I totally agree with that. And I think it's actually going to increase even further in 2025, just because the people that have the money are mandating it.
Right.
Yeah. And to your point about VCs, I used to work at a company that was acquired by Vista Equity, was head of revenue operations right when it was acquired. And you know how Vista comes with playbooks, right? They do have their playbooks. One of the core playbooks is in revenue operations. They come with their set of methods, their tactics, their processes. They're very hard on deal desk. It has to be super buttoned up. Approval structure, approval processes, percentages, levels, etc. Enablement. and actually putting enablement under revenue operations. That's another thing that they do. And then very, very key metrics. So they sort of gave us the template that we had to follow when it comes to, you know, the metrics that we were putting in front of the board deck. So I 100% agree with you. That usually is like comes from the outside of a company. People with money, they realize what's working, right, what's not, and there's already tested and trialed practices there.
Very cool.
Yeah, when I was at Nimbus was an Insight Partners company. And so shortly after that engagement is when I was brought in by the CRO. And in fact, I mean, it was just about building for scale. So bringing revenue operations, you know, made a whole lot of sense. And, you know, we came in and just, you know, literally there was no CRM. Like, company wanted to build the CRM themselves because we would build them for banks, which was great. But when I came in, it was like, oh no, we need to not rely on our own product and build in a. So we went with Salesforce, and we built it from the ground up and built it to be scalable. And I think that's critical. But the company was aligned. The CEO was very well aligned with Insight Partners on what needed to happen. That we needed RevOps. Everybody was behind it. Yep. There was a true CRO structure in place. It wasn't kumbaya all the time, but like it made sense and everybody was on the same page. And I think one of the challenges is, yes, while that statistic is true, and that, you know, VCs and PE firms are kind of mandating this and backing this, not every company knows what to do with it. Right. So, you know, as a leader, you struggle in the organization to be like, no, this is what I do. This is what I do, and I can help you. Yeah. And what I've found in different roles is it's like this we they mentality. Right. Well, like, you know, you're RevOps, you know, we're marketing, or we're operations, or we're this, and I'm like, no. We're all one company. Right. We're all about the customer, and we're all about revenue, because if there's no revenue, we're not here, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that the other thing you've got to consider with that is VPs have been doing that for what, 10, 15 plus years?
Right.
How long's the market been really good? 10, 15 plus years. And so you're asking a sales leader who has always just like had the golden goose of like, I want a software. Yeah, let's go get it. I want to hire a new sales rep. Yeah, let's go get it. That's how I get to my number.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're asking them to change. And RevOps can really help those departments, because these leaders, they're capable of doing it. They have their playbook of, hey, this is how I've scaled these other 10 companies. Right. Well, that's not the world we live in anymore. Yeah. And you have to adapt, just like we've had to adapt, but we can be on the same team.
Yeah.
Right.
Not like, oh, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I think you do work through so much buy-in, right? Even if you have skeptics who you stand up a revenue operations function in an organization, you're going to have some people that have seen it done before, done effectively. They're super excited about it. You have others that view it as a threat. But it's funny, in the organizations that I've been a part of, and some big companies, I'm saying like AWS, I'm saying PayPal, we had some really good supporters of what we were trying to do from a revenue operations function. And we had people that absolutely hated the idea for exactly the same reason. I'm losing power. I'm losing people. I don't understand what value you're going to, I know how to get things done now. Why are you changing things? We have a perfectly working engine. And it's funny, in time, as you start to chip away and you actually deliver value under a revenue operations umbrella, it's amazing the metrics you can track, the value you can deliver, and ultimately win those people over. I haven't been in an organization yet that has backed away from revenue operations. They just go deeper into it and expand it and add more and more services to it.
There's central ownership, right? Of all of those metrics of the data set. There's central ownership. There's no silos anymore where your CMO comes with one set of data and chief sales with another. And the very heated discussions, you know, they're fighting over data. So the value is there. But I agree with you. It has to be alignment at the top. It has to be like philosophical alignment at the top that this is how they're moving.
Yeah. You guys might disagree with this, but for me, it's not about reducing the number of metrics that we're tracking. A lot of the times you come in and we're tracking too much. For me, it's that you don't know how to actionize the data you're tracking. Right. And so it just becomes wasted time. Yeah. But if we could, I mean, maybe this is where AI comes into play, but if we can actionize and mobilize the data that we have,
Yeah.
the metrics that we're
So
tracking.
what, right?
Yeah.
So what
So
is
what?
dropping?
Exactly. And
What's the
and I
extent?
think that's where so many metrics go to die is just the number.
Yeah.
And then it's you get 6 months down the road and you're like, oh, I'm not gonna track that anymore.
Right.
If there's a why behind it and an actual implementation of this is what we're gonna change because of that, the more the merrier, because that means more change, more growth. I don't think a lot of operators are equipped to give the so what about the data that you're tracking.
And also what I wanted to say is that not every question can be answered with data. Where I'm going through now is that we are in the analysis paralysis. We track every freaking call, and then if that call was a meaningful connect or not so meaningful connect on the level from 1 to 10, how meaningful their connect was. We do that as well. We average that. We do median of that, we do. But then the data cannot answer the question that, for example, we changed the sales process in June and that's why my pipeline dropped. Or, our key team member resigned in July and that's why, some of those opportunities got stale because we did not reassign them in time. I cannot get those, with data.
Right.
And this is where, RevOps people come into play because they keep track of all of this. We keep
Internal reality for
exactly.
me. Yeah.
Yep.
Work through this change management. We did this process change. We have this training scheduled back then, and that's what happened after, There's also seasonality, right? So what I want to say is that we absolutely should be tracking like all levels of data, but there is also some component that is like, your historical knowledge
Yeah.
that should also be layered there.
You gotta tell the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And a good RevOps leader, that's what they should be trained in. Their team should definitely be trained on telling that story effectively.
For sure. It just reminds me of when you mentioned just explaining the data. We did a data cleanup last year and it was like August of 2023. I mean, that's when we got rid of all of the old deals, all the things that, people are just holding on to. Stage 1 was called nurture. And I was like, no, we're done. That's not. Oh, no. They were like freaking out, like full on freaking out. Cause I just said like, look, we're done. We're killing them all. Don't worry about your loss rate. But like as of August of 2023, that's when we had clean pipeline. And, we had to explain it. We had to explain it on board decks and say, this is why the drop and this is the change that we did. And then we did another big change on January 1st of last year where we completely changed the way that we actually forecast the deals. So not everything that we sell is SaaS. A lot of it is, behavior change. And so I put together a new model where we have this slope of predictability. So that way, when, the way that we value deals is totally 1000% different than we did last year. So there's like a clear line, January 1st. So anything before January 1st is like apples and oranges. So, we can't look at some of that historical data because I wasn't going to go back in time, right? Like too far to really look for that. But it's so important that you tell that story. You answer the why and say, now we're clean as of this point forward. So, which is what RevOps can do because it has to be aligned with the timing. Now we have our new metric that we're going to track. Here's why we did it. And we also align the systems to it and the forecasting process and your cadence and the comp plans, all the other stuff that goes with it. Having that story and having that, that clear line of, when we start, when we stop, and those kind of things are super critical.
Good point that it's not siloed. The metrics themselves, they're
Right.
not siloed, right?
Yeah.
There's so much surrounding in your process, your forecasting, your comp plans, your
Yeah.
change management, enablement. There's so much. And, focusing on what you want to track means you have to actually touch on all of those surrounding components, right? Have to have your process in place, your forecasting in place, your training in place, your comp plans in place, like everything to support your metrics that you're focusing on.
And it's funny because RevOps is becoming that standard now. Like I'm trying to think in my head to go into an organization like they existed 10 years ago. It's really challenging for me to envisage. Like just with all the value that's there with RevOps now, trying to go back to the old world of marketing ops and sales ops and CS ops with all the different functional teams around it, it's just the value that you lose by all of that just lost energy of just trying to figure out and not really having all that energy and activity yielding much. RevOps is definitely that banner that brings all that together so well and delivers so much value back to an organization and ultimately back to the customers. So I guess that stat that is right. So the 7% growth in revenue operations function we expect to see as we go into 2025 and beyond. Want more RevOps goodness between episodes? Follow RevOps Circle on LinkedIn. We're posting all the time. Whether it's clips from these episodes, show updates, or behind-the-scenes content, we're a fun follow, I promise. Until then, keep your brains sharp and your circles wide. We're out.